the first time I told Jenna about my business idea, she laughed. Not in a cruel, over-the-top way, just that little scoff she did when she thought I was being naive. "It's cute," she said, sipping her latte, "but you'd need like 100 grand to make that work. And who's gonna buy handmade candles for that much?" I didn't answer. I just smiled and tucked my sketchbook back into my bag. It wasn't the first time she'd underestimated me, but it stung. More than usual because Jenna had been my best friend for 12 years. We'd been through breakups, moves, and even a year of sharing a one-bedroom apartment. She knew how much this meant to me. I'd been quietly developing the concept for months, a boutique candle shop that specialized in custom scents inspired by memories. Not just lavender or vanilla, but grandma's kitchen with hints of cinnamon and apple pie, or first date in autumn with cedar and cardamom. I'd taken courses, experimented with wax blends, and even consulted a trademark attorney. By the time I'd mentioned it to Jenna, I already had the business name registered and the paperwork filed. But I didn't tell her that part. 2 months later, I saw the Instagram post. "Coming soon, Memory Flame, candles that tell your story." My stomach dropped. The logo looked eerily familiar, the same cursive style I doodled in my sketchbook. The tagline? Word for word what I'd said over coffee that morning in March. I stared at my phone, the comments blurring together. She'd taken my idea, not just the concept, the branding, the pitch, the entire soul of the business I'd been building in my mind for over a year, and she'd beaten me to the announcement. I didn't call her, I didn't send an angry text or write a public post. I simply closed Instagram, took a deep breath, and opened the email from my lawyer. We'd been working on the trademark application for months, and last week it had been approved. Memory Flame was mine, on paper, legally, undeniably mine. Jenna didn't know that yet. For the next few weeks, I watched from the sidelines as she poured her energy into the launch. She leased a storefront, ordered bulk supplies, and posted daily updates. People in our circle congratulated her like she was some kind of visionary. She even did a local TV segment about her idea. I let her have her moment. When she sent me a text, "Hey, I know you were talking about doing something similar. I hope you're not mad. There's room for both of us." I replied, "Of course, best of luck." She had no idea I was signing the lease for the shop right across the street from hers. No idea that my store name was already trademarked and that hers was technically infringing. No idea that I was about to let her spend every last cent on a brand she couldn't legally keep. Jenna announced her grand opening for the first Saturday in June. I circled the date on my wall calendar and wrote 2 words beneath it: soft launch. Not hers, mine. If she wanted fireworks, I wanted frictionless. The plan was simple: build in silence, open in shadow, then let the law do the talking. I signed my lease on a rainy Thursday and walked the length of empty space. Dusty sunlight slanted through the front windows like stage lights waiting for an actor. I could already see the shelves. Pale oak, rounded edges, every jar labeled by memory rather than scent. Dad's old record player, City After Rain, the apartment we started in. I sketched the layout, measuring steps like choreography. Across the street, Jenna's place was loud with activity. Painters, a balloon arch consultation, ring lights blazing for reels. She waved at me one afternoon, all teeth. "You should stop by opening day," she called. "Get inspired." I lifted my takeaway coffee and a toast and kept walking. My contractor, Mateo, moved like a magician. A weekend, the walls were creamy and calm, the shelves floated. We installed a scent bar with glass cloches and brass tags, each connected to a story card. Customers would lift a dome, inhale, then read the short memory that inspired the blend. The point wasn't just fragrance, it was reclamation. Meanwhile, my attorney prepared 2 envelopes. The first, a courteous cease and desist about the trademark. The second, a more formal letter ready for filing if she ignored the first. Timing, he asked. Day after her ribbon cutting, I said. Let the cameras capture the name everywhere first. He didn't smile, but his eyes did. I ordered inventory and staggered shipments to avoid tipping off suppliers. Labels arrived last, embossed, matte, tactile like book covers. The logo looked exactly like the registration certificate, mine and only mine. On a quiet evening, I stood outside both storefronts. Jenna's window shouted in neon fonts. Mine whispered. A handwritten sign said, "Private event by invitation only." I'd invited 12 people, a local journalist who loved slow stories, 2 small business owners who hated copycats, and 6 women who had messaged me about candles that smelled like resilience. The last 2 seats went to my grandmother's best friends. They had known me since I smelled like Play-Doh. We opened the door at dusk. Soft music, flicker, not glare. I told them about the scent bar and the memory cards. They told me about the moments they wanted to hold without hurting. When the journalist asked the name of the shop, I showed her the framed certificate. She took a breath, the kind people take before a headline writes itself. When the lights were low and the last guest left, I sealed the first envelope and placed it beside my keys. Across the street, Jenna was rehearsing her ribbon-cutting speech on Instagram Live, swearing this was the start of everything. She wasn't wrong. It just wasn't hers. Opening day for Jenna looks like a Pinterest board had exploded. The sidewalk was lined with pastel balloons, an ice cream cart was parked out front, and a local influencer in a floppy hat was live streaming the whole event. I stood at my shop window across the street, coffee in hand, watching her slice through the ceremonial ribbon with comically oversized scissors. The crowd clapped, cameras flashed, and I could practically hear her voice in my head. This is it. I've made it. In a way, she had. She'd made it very easy for me. By noon, her store was packed. I caught snippets of her spiel as customers wandered back out into the street. Every candle tells a story, inspired by memories, something truly unique. It was eerie hearing my words tumble out of her mouth, wrapped in her trademark false warmth. At 1:15, the mail arrived. Our courier, who also delivered to her side, crossed the street, nodded at me, and then headed into Jenna's store with a small, official-looking envelope. I'd timed it down to the hour. I didn't see her open it, but 10 minutes later, she appeared in her doorway, her face set in that tight, brittle smile she used when she was cornered. Her eyes flicked toward me, scanning my storefront for any sign of life. I gave her nothing, just a polite nod and a sip of coffee. The cease and desist wasn't cruel. It was professional, bulletproof. It outlined my registered trademark, provided the filing date, and made it clear she had 14 days to remove the infringing name from all signage, packaging, and promotional materials. My attorney's tone was almost gentle, but the subtext was a brick wall. I know Jenna well enough to predict her next moves. First, denial. This can't be real. Then anger. She's doing this to ruin me. Then bargaining. Maybe we can share the name. The last one was my favorite. I imagined her sitting in the back room calculating the cost of rebranding every label, bag, and tag she just paid for. I didn't go gloat. I didn't even walk past her store. Instead, I busied myself with the day's deliveries. More jars, more wicks, another shipment of custom boxes. By late afternoon, a friend texted me a screenshot. Jenna had posted a thinly veiled rant about people who tried to stifle others' creativity and how real talent can't be trademarked. The comments weren't as supportive as she'd hoped. A few locals knew the truth and hinted at it, and one particularly blunt user asked, "Didn't you get that name from my name?" She hadn't responded yet.
At 5 p.m., I flipped my closed sign and locked up. Through the glass, I saw her pacing her shop, phone pressed to her ear, lips moving fast. I wondered if she was calling a lawyer or her printer, or both. The street was quiet as I walked away. Behind me, 2 stores stood across from each other, one buzzing under a cloud of uncertainty, and one calm, quietly waiting for the right moment to open its doors. The paper had been delivered. The countdown had begun.
Day 1 after the letter, I didn't hear from Jenna directly. Instead, mutual friends started checking in. A carefully worded text from Lisa. "Hey, Jenna's saying there's some kind of mix-up with your businesses. Is everything okay?" I replied with one line, "No mix-up." That was all. By day 3, the edges of her Instagram presence were fraying. Posts about her grand opening had slowed. She'd swapped her logo on her stories for a text-only banner, Memory Flame, in a generic font, as if removing the stylized design might buy her time. It wouldn't. The trademark didn't protect just the font. It protected the name, the brand, the concept tied to it. On the morning of day 5, I saw her through the shop window with a stack of boxes, peeling off labels one by one. She caught me looking and flashed a smile so tight it could have snapped. It wasn't anger anymore. It was calculation. She was trying to figure out how far I'd let this go. Meanwhile, my own store was nearly finished. The scent bar was stocked, the register set up, the first wave of candles lined in perfect rows. My contractor was building the final display, a wall-sized map where customers could pin a place that inspired their candle order. I imagined people leaning over it, swapping stories about Paris rooftops and childhood kitchens. Each night, I'd walk the block and glance at her shop. The bright energy of opening week had drained away. Foot traffic slowed. People still wandered in, but they left quickly and empty-handed more often than not. Without the novelty of her original idea, the cracks were showing. She hadn't put in the research to create blends beyond the basics. Her candles looked like generic store-bought stock poured into glass jars with a sticker slapped on. On day 8, she crossed the street. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing just outside my door. She glanced at my logo, Memory Flame, R in a circle, bold and undeniable. "I don't think there's much to discuss," I said. She lowered her voice. "We've been friends for years. We can work this out. Maybe we could both use the name. Different styles, different audiences." "You mean I let you keep using my trademark while you profit off my work?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "You don't own candles, my name. You don't own memories." "No," I said, "just Memory Flame, and the business model you've been parroting word for word." She looked like she might argue, but instead, she exhaled sharply and muttered, "You'll regret this." "Not likely," I said, and stepped back inside. That night, my attorney sent me a short email. 7 days left. If no compliance, we proceed to filing. I closed my laptop and glanced out the window. Across the street, Jenna was on the phone again, pasting under the harsh glow of her shop's overhead lights. I knew that look. It was the face of someone realizing the clock wasn't just ticking, it was running out. By day 10, the tension between our 2 storefronts was thick enough to taste. Customers who'd been in her shop were starting to wander into mine, curious about the mysterious, not yet open boutique with the frosted windows and soft lighting that hinted at something more refined. I didn't sell to them yet, just smiled and handed out small linen drawstring bags containing a single tea light with the handwritten note, "Opening soon, every scent tells a story." The logo was printed in gold foil, trademark symbol gleaming like a warning shot. That same afternoon, Jenna hosted what she called a collaboration brainstorming session in her store. I could hear her voice through my open windows as she pitched to two local lifestyle bloggers about pivoting the brand and going in a more general direction. The bloggers smiled politely but didn't take notes. One of them ducked out early and stopped by my place on her way to the parking lot. She leaned in conspiratorially. "She's floundering. Everyone can see it." By evening, my phone buzzed with a call from my attorney. "She responded," he said, "not in writing, but through her lawyer. They want to negotiate keeping the name for another 6 months while they transition." "Not interested," I replied. "She can rebrand now or the paperwork goes in Monday." He chuckled. "I'll let them know." That same weekend, Jenna tried a more personal angle. She shut up at my door again, this time without the brittle smile. Her voice was quieter, her eyes darting away from mine. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? I shouldn't have copied so much, but I've already invested so much money." I stopped her there. "And you thought the cost of stealing was less than the cost of creating your own idea?" Her face hardened. "I thought we were friends." "We were," I said evenly, "until you decided friendship meant free access to my work." She didn't reply, just turned and walked back to her shop. Later, I saw her tearing down the big memory flame sign from above the door, her shoulders tight, movements sharp. A group of passerby slowed to watch, whispering. Public rebrands are never graceful. By Monday morning, the logo was gone. In its place, a temporary vinyl banner read "Jenna's Candle Co." in plain block letters. The Instagram feed was scrubbed, every memory flame post replaced with vague captions about new directions and fresh beginnings. But the damage was already done. Her launch hype had evaporated, and the whispers in town had cemented the truth. She'd been caught. That afternoon, I unlocked my doors for the first time. No balloons, no fanfare, just the gentle chime of the bell above the door and the scent of Grandma's kitchen drifting into the street. From my counter, I could see Jenna across the way, watching. Her store was empty, mine had a line. The breaking point had come and gone, and she was on the wrong side of it.
The first full week of my shop being open felt like the tide had turned and stayed that way. From the moment I flipped the sign to open, the foot traffic was steady. People weren't just browsing, they were buying, asking questions, telling me the stories behind the scents they chose. Every Grandma's Kitchen candle sold came with someone's eyes going soft as they remembered apple pie cooling on a counter. Every City After Rain jar left with a smile. It wasn't just about candles anymore. It was about connection. Customers lingered at the scent bar, swapping stories with strangers, reading the little cards tucked beneath the glass domes. They were invested, and I knew it wasn't just because the candles smelled good. It was because the experience felt intentional, unlike the generic jars Jenna had slapped a sticker on. On Wednesday, a local lifestyle blogger posted a feature on my shop, complete with photos of the map wall and a short video of me explaining how each scent was inspired by a memory. By Thursday morning, my inbox was flooded with wholesale inquiries from boutique hotels and gift shops in neighboring towns. Across the street, Jenna's shop was quiet. Her rebrand to Jenna's Candle Co. looked rushed and uninspired, with a cheap vinyl sign flapping in the wind. She'd switched to safe scents, lavender, vanilla, sandalwood, but there was no hook, no story. I noticed she'd removed the "inspired by memories" phrasing entirely. My lawyer had made sure of that. That Friday, I caught her standing in her doorway, watching the small crowd gathered outside mine. Her expression was unreadable, part resentment, part resignation. I waved politely. She didn't wave back. Later that afternoon, a mutual acquaintance stopped in. "You know, she's telling people she came up with this whole memory candle thing years ago, right? Says you just had better lawyers." I laughed softly. "Better lawyers? Maybe.
Better plan? Definitely. That night, I stayed late restocking shelves and tallying the week's sales. It was already more than I'd projected for the entire first month. I thought about the months of preparation, the quiet research, the careful paperwork, how she'd underestimated all of it. Before locking up, I walked outside and looked across the street. Her windows were dark. A single open sign still glowed faintly, though no one was inside. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had opened first, loudly and with all the flash she could muster. But here I was, a week in, with a growing customer base and a trademark she'd never been able to touch. As I turned to go back in, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from my lawyer. FYI, her attorney has officially confirmed she will not contest the trademark. All claims withdrawn. It wasn't just the first week of my business. It was the first week of knowing without doubt that I'd won.
By the second week, the energy on our block felt different. Customers who once treated Jenna's store as the new shiny thing now walked past it without slowing, heading straight for my door. A few even stopped to take photos of my display windows before coming in, tagging my shop on social media with captions like, "Finally, a place that feels special," or "This is how you do candles." The map wall had become a local curiosity. People came just to add a pin and share their story, sometimes buying a candle, sometimes not, but always leaving with a smile. I didn't mind the browsers. I knew the memories they connected with here would bring them back. On Wednesday afternoon, I noticed Jenna had covered her windows with brown paper. The big "Jenna's Candle Co." banner was gone. A "Closed for renovation" sign hung crookedly on the glass. My guess? She'd run out of cash to keep the lights on. The truth was, her launch had eaten her budget, and the rebrand had drained what was left. Without the stolen concept to anchor her, she had nothing fresh to sell. That evening, over dinner with a few fellow small business owners, the conversation turned to her. "You were patient," one of them said. "Most people would have gone public, called her out online, but you just waited." That was the point. She spent everything building something she didn't own. I wanted her to finish before she realized I'd already claimed the ground under her feet. The next morning, a delivery driver dropped off a stack of boxes. "Across the street told me to bring these here," he said, setting them down. My name was on none of them, but I recognized the bulk supply candles Jenna had been using. Generic jars, generic scents. I wondered if she'd abandoned the order or simply couldn't pay for it. Either way, the supplier clearly wanted them gone. By Saturday, my shop was buzzing. A group of out-of-town tourists had found me through the blogger's post, and they bought half the grandma's kitchen stock in one go. My assistant, Marisol, kept the scent bar flowing while I rang people up. Through the window, I noticed the brown paper across Jenna's storefront had started peeling at the edges, exposing empty shelves inside. That afternoon, Lisa, the mutual friend who texted me after the cease and desist, stopped in. She's telling people she's taking a creative break to work on new ideas. But everyone knows the truth. You beat her. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but because it was the first time I'd heard someone say it aloud. It wasn't about crushing her anymore. It was about proving to myself that preparation, patience, and principle win in the end. As Lisa paid for her candle, I glanced back at the empty shop across the street. The shift had happened. The game was no longer about competition. She was gone from the board. 3 weeks after Jenna's paper-covered windows went up, she returned. Not the triumphant influencer-ready Jenna from opening day. This was a quieter version. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, clothes that looked hastily chosen. She crossed the street slowly, like she wasn't sure she wanted to arrive. I was rearranging a display of first date and autumn candles when the bell above my door chimed. She hesitated just inside, glancing around at the warm lighting, the soft music, the map wall dotted with pins. I could almost see her comparing it to the fluorescent glare and empty shelves that had been hers. "I wanted to talk," she said finally.
I nodded toward a small seating area near the window. "Go ahead." She sat, fidgeting with her sleeves. "I'm not here to fight. I guess I didn't realize how much work you'd actually put into this idea before I—" She trailed off. "Tute?" I offered. Her cheeks flushed. "Yes, I thought it was just a concept you'd been toying with. I didn't think you'd gone as far as, well, all of this." She gestured around the shop. "I underestimated you." "You did more than that," I said evenly. "You assumed I wouldn't protect myself, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care." She nodded, eyes fixed on her hands. "I'm sorry. I should have asked to collaborate, or better yet, come up with my own thing." For a moment, I almost believed her. But then she added, "I just thought we could have been successful together if you'd been less territorial." There it was, the same inability to fully own her choices. Protecting what I built isn't territorial, Jenna. It's smart business. You know what's territorial? Claiming someone else's work as your own. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a couple paused to look at my window display, smiling as they pointed to the scent names. "I'm moving," she said finally. "Going to stay with my sister for a while, maybe figure out something else to do." I didn't offer comfort. Instead, I stood and extended my hand. "Then I wish you luck, with something that's actually yours this time." She shook it, her grip brief and limp, then left without another word. I watched her cross the street, unlock her empty shop, and disappear inside. By closing time, the for lease sign was up in her window. The space that had once been a neon-colored challenge now stood bare, waiting for someone else with vision and, hopefully, integrity. That night, as I tallied sales and answered emails from new wholesale accounts, I realized something important. Her return wasn't about mending fences. It was a quiet admission of defeat. And in business, that's often the loudest kind of ending there is. A month after Jenna's shop went dark, the landlord came to see me. He'd stopped by to compliment my window displays. Apparently, they were drawing people to the block from 2 neighborhoods over. Then, casually, he mentioned the vacant space across the street. "It's available now," he said. "Given your success here, thought you might be interested." I almost laughed. The poetic symmetry was impossible to ignore. The same storefront that had tried to eclipse me now sat empty, its rent sign tilting in the wind. I told him I'd think about it. In truth, I knew by the end of our conversation that I wanted it. Not out of spite, but because it made business sense. Within 2 weeks, the lease was mine. I didn't rush into renovations. I wanted the reveal to be deliberate. The new space would be an extension of my brand, not just candles, but a full memory market experience. Artisan soaps, custom journals, locally made keepsake boxes, everything curated to tell a story. When word got out, the buzz was immediate. Customers who had loyally supported me through the Jenna chapter were thrilled. Some joked that the ghost of bad ideas past was finally being put to rest. I didn't encourage the gossip, but I didn't stop it either. The day construction began, I stood in the empty shop and tried to imagine it as Jenna had once seen it, her big break. It was strange to think about how much had changed in just a few months. I remember watching her ribbon cutting from my window, coffee in hand, waiting for the legal gears to turn. And now here I was, legally holding the keys. Meanwhile, my original store was busier than ever. Marisol had taken over day-to-day operations there, freeing me to focus on design and partnerships. We were finalizing a deal with a boutique hotel chain to create exclusive scent lines for each property.
One afternoon, as I met with a local carpenter to discuss shelving for the new space, a familiar figure walked past. Jenna. She didn't look in, but her pace slowed. Maybe she'd seen the coming soon memory market sign taped to the door. Maybe she already knew. That evening, I got a text from Lisa. Saw Jenna at the coffee shop. She knows about the expansion. Didn't say much, just that she hopes it works out for you. It was the closest thing to goodwill I'd heard from her in months. And maybe it was genuine. But I wasn't doing this for her approval. I was doing it for me, and for every small business owner who'd ever had their work stolen, doubted, or dismissed. The new shop would open in 8 weeks. This time, there'd be no need for a cease and desist. No countdown clock. The space across the street wasn't a rival anymore. It was mine, and I intended to make it unforgettable. Opening day for the memory market felt like the closing of a chapter I hadn't realized I'd still been writing. The street was alive with music and conversation. Instead of balloons and gimmicks, I'd chosen fresh flowers, soft lighting, and an open-door policy that let the scent of cinnamon, cedar, and citrus drift out to greet passers-by. From my original shop, Marisol had brought over customers in small groups, encouraging them to explore both locations. The memory market wasn't just retail, it was an experience. The front half was a curated showcase of candles, soaps, and artisan keepsakes, each tied to a story. The back half was an interactive workshop space where people could blend their own scents and create personalized labels. By noon, the map wall in the new shop was already filling with pins from visitors. A couple from out of state marked the beach where they'd gotten engaged. A teenager tagged the park where she'd learned to ride a bike. People weren't just shopping, they were leaving pieces of themselves behind. In the midst of the crowd, I caught sight of Jenna, standing on the sidewalk. She didn't come in, just lingered for a few minutes, watching. There was no anger in her face this time, only a kind of distant acceptance. Our eyes met briefly. I gave a polite nod. She returned it, almost imperceptibly, before walking away. The day flowed effortlessly. A journalist from a regional lifestyle magazine showed up unannounced, scribbling notes as she wandered through the shop. One of the hotel partners dropped in to finalize our exclusive scent contract. Local artisans I'd featured in the new space hugged me, thanking me for giving their work a platform. Late in the afternoon, I stepped outside and looked across the street at both my shops, bustling with people. The block that had once been the stage for a stolen idea was now anchored by 2 thriving spaces with my name on the lease. It struck me then that the real victory wasn't in beating Jenna. It wasn't even in holding the trademark. The win was in the patience, the preparation, the refusal to rush a good idea just to prove a point. I'd let her launch first because I knew I was building something that could last. And now, years from that first coffee table sketch, I was standing in it. As the sun dipped low, the golden light spilling onto the street, I heard the door chime behind me. A little girl emerged holding a candle labeled Grandpa's Garden, her mom smiling as she explained the scent came from lilacs and fresh soil. I realized then, this was the full circle. The story had begun with someone taking my idea. Now it was mine again, stronger, brighter, and shared with people who valued it. I locked eyes with Marisol through the window of my first shop. She gave me a thumbs up. I smiled back, knowing this was only the end of one chapter. The rest was still waiting to be written.